1. My name is Madeline, 58 years old, and I never thought I'd catch my daughter-in-law sleeping with my husband just days before our divorce was finalized. What shocked everyone wasn't the affair itself, but how I handled it. When I walked into that lawyer's office, nobody expected what I had up my sleeve. If you're wondering how a heartbroken woman turned the tables on two cheaters, stick around. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you. Trust me, this story will show you exactly why staying calm might be your greatest weapon. I spent 35 years of my life with Harold, 3.5 decades of memories, struggles, triumphs, and building what I thought was an unshakable foundation. We met in college when I was a bright-eyed 19-year-old with dreams of owning my own business someday, and he was an ambitious law student with a confident smile that made my heart skip a beat. Our wedding was small, but beautiful. My parents couldn't afford anything extravagant, but Harold's family helped, and we managed to create a day full of love and promise. I still remember the way he looked at me as I walked down the aisle, like I was the answer to every question he'd ever had. The early years were good. We struggled financially while Harold established himself at a law firm, and I worked retail jobs to help make ends meet. We lived in a tiny apartment where the neighbors fought loudly and the heating barely worked in winter. But we were happy. We were a team. Our son Thomas came along 7 years into our marriage. Holding him in my arms for the first time, I felt a love so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. Harold cried too, something he rarely did. Those were golden days watching our little boy grow, teaching him to walk, hearing his first words. When Thomas was 3, I finally took the leap and opened my own small beauty supply store. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Harold supported me, but warned me not to expect too much. Most small businesses fail within the first year, he reminded me repeatedly. But mine didn't. Through hard work, excellent customer service, and a genuine passion for helping women feel beautiful, my little store thrived. Eventually, I expanded to 3 locations across the city. Meanwhile, Harold's career flourished as well. He became a partner at his firm, specializing in corporate law. Our financial worries disappeared, and we moved to a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. On the surface, we were living the American dream. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I can't pinpoint exactly when Harold began viewing me differently. Maybe it was when my business became successful in its own right. Maybe it was when I refused to close my stores, even though we didn't need the money anymore, as he put it. Or maybe it was just time and familiarity eroding what we once had. Harold became controlling about our finances. Despite my business success, he insisted on managing all our money. He opened accounts I didn't have access to, made investments without consulting me. When I questioned him, he would remind me of his expertise. I deal with contracts and business law every day, Madeline. This is my area, not yours. Thomas grew up, went to college, and eventually fell in love with Catherine. The first time Thomas brought her home, I was immediately struck by how beautiful she was. Tall, slender, with glossy dark hair, and a smile that lit up her entire face. She was 15 years younger than Thomas, only 22 to his 37, but they seemed happy together. I tried to welcome Catherine into our family, invited her for lunch, offered to help with wedding planning. She was always polite, but somewhat distant. I chalked it up to nervousness, or perhaps cultural differences, as her family was from the West Coast, while we were East Coast born and bred. After their wedding 2 years ago, Thomas and Catherine settled just 30 minutes from our home. We would have Sunday dinners together twice a month. These gatherings became increasingly tense, though. Harold would dominate conversations, talking about his cases, his golf game, his opinions on politics. Catherine would hang on his every word, laughing at all his jokes, asking follow-up questions. I noticed how her eyes lingered on him, but dismissed it as admiration for her father-in-law. By our 35th wedding anniversary, my marriage felt like an empty shell. Harold and I lived separate lives under the same roof. He was rarely home, always working late or meeting clients. When he was home, he barely acknowledged my presence. I felt invisible, unappreciated, and increasingly certain that this wasn't how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. After months of consideration, I finally worked up the courage to suggest divorce. I expected anger arguments, perhaps even tears. Instead, Harold looked almost relieved. "If that's what you want, I won't fight it," he said coolly. "I'll have my office draw up the paperwork." No questions about why, no suggestions of counseling, no acknowledgement of 35 years together, just immediate acceptance and a business-like approach to ending our marriage. It hurt more than I expected. We agreed to meet with his lawyer the following week to begin the process. Harold moved into the guest bedroom, and an uncomfortable silence descended on our house. I thought the worst part was over. I had no idea what was coming. The first sign that something wasn't right came 3 days after our divorce conversation. I stopped by Thomas and Catherine's house unannounced, bringing some homemade cookies as an excuse. Usually Catherine would welcome me with a hug, but this time she barely opened the door. "Thomas isn't home," she said, blocking the entrance. Her hair was disheveled, and she wore a robe tightly closed at the neck. "That's okay, dear. I thought we could have some girl time," I replied, trying to peek past her into the house. "I'm actually not feeling well. Might be coming down with something." She coughed unconvincingly. "I wouldn't want you to catch it." "Oh, I can just leave these then." I handed her the container of cookies. "Thanks, Madeline. I'll tell Thomas you stopped by." She closed the door quickly. As I walked back to my car, I noticed a familiar vehicle parked down the street. It looked like Harold's silver Audi, but I couldn't be sure from that distance. Why would Harold's car be near Thomas and Catherine's house in the middle of a workday? I dismissed the thought. Harold rarely visited them without me, and he should have been at work. The next unusual incident happened when I called Thomas to tell him about the divorce. I expected him to be upset, or at least surprised. "Mum, if this is what you and Dad want, I support you both," he said, his voice oddly flat. "People grow apart. It happens." "You don't seem surprised," I remarked. There was a pause. "Well, it's been obvious you two haven't been happy for a while." "Has your father spoken to you about this already?" I asked. Another pause. No, I've noticed, that's all." Thomas, who usually called me several times a week, became suddenly difficult to reach. When we did speak, our conversations were brief and surface level. He declined my invitation for dinner, saying they were busy with work stuff. My son, who had always been open and warm with me, was now distant and evasive. Meanwhile, Harold's behavior grew increasingly strange. He started coming home later than usual. His usual conservative suits were replaced with more stylish modern cuts. He began using a new cologne. One evening, I noticed he'd gotten a haircut that made him look years younger styled in a way I'd never seen before. "New look?" I asked casually over dinner. "Time for a change," he replied without looking up from his phone. He was texting someone, smiling at the screen in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. That night, while Harold was showering, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. There were dozens of text messages from a contact listed simply as K. The most recent read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear that blue shirt I love." My heart raced. K. Catherine. No, it couldn't be. There had to be another explanation. A client, perhaps, or a colleague, whose name started with K. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it, feeling guilty yet unsettled. The following day, I met my friend Janet for coffee. Janet and I had been friends since our children were in preschool together, and she'd been my rock through many difficult times. I think Harold might be having an affair, I confided after we'd settled at our table. Janet's expression didn't register surprise. Honestly, Madeline, I've wondered about that for a while now. What? Why didn't you say anything? She sighed. What would I say? Hey, I think your husband might be cheating, but I have zero proof. I was hoping I was wrong. I found texts on his phone from someone called Kay, I said. And he's been acting differently. New clothes, new haircut, coming home late. Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Do you have any idea who this Kay might be? I hesitated, then shared my worst fear. I hate even thinking this, but Catherine's name starts with K. Janet's eyes widened. Your daughter-in-law, Madeline, that would be beyond horrible. I know, and I feel awful even suspecting it. But she's been acting strange too, and Thomas has been distant. Before you jump to conclusions, you need evidence, Janet said firmly. If you're wrong about this, you could damage your relationship with Thomas permanently. She was right, of course. I needed proof before I could even consider such a devastating accusation. The next day, I decided to follow Harold when he left the house. I felt ridiculous, like a character in some bad television drama. But I needed to know the truth. I maintained a discreet distance as his Audi wound through the city streets. To my surprise, he didn't head toward his office or any of his usual haunts. Instead, he drove to an upscale apartment building downtown, one I didn't recognize. He parked in the visitor lot, checked his appearance in the rearview mirror, and headed inside with a confident stride. I waited in my car, heart pounding. 20 minutes later, Catherine emerged from the same building, looking nervously around the parking lot before hurrying to her car. My world tilted on its axis. I felt dizzy, nauseous. It was true then. The worst possible scenario was actually happening, my husband and my daughter-in-law. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, I could barely process it. But despite the shock, a strange calm descended over me. Perhaps it was self-preservation, my mind protecting me from fully feeling the devastation. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. A quiet, simmering determination. I drove home in a daze, my thoughts swirling with confusion and hurt. Why would Catherine do this? Why would Harold? What did this mean for Thomas? For our divorce? For our family, one thing was certain. I needed more information before deciding what to do next. The evidence I'd gathered so far was circumstantial at best. I needed irrefutable proof before confronting anyone with such serious allegations. After careful consideration, I decided to hire a private investigator. Finding one was easier than I expected. A quick internet search yielded several options, and I chose a woman named Diana, who specialized in infidelity cases. She had excellent reviews and a background in law enforcement, which gave me confidence in her discretion and professionalism. We met at a quiet cafe across town. Diana was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that I immediately appreciated. I'll need as much information as you can provide, she said, after I'd explained my suspicions. Their routines, vehicles, phone numbers, social media accounts, places they frequent. I provided everything I knew. Feeling a strange detachment as I described my husband and daughter-in-law's habits. Diana took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. This is a delicate situation, she acknowledged. Family dynamics complicate things. But I'll be thorough and discreet. You'll have answers within a week. The waiting was excruciating. I went through the motions of daily life, running my business, preparing for the upcoming meeting with Harold's lawyer, all while carrying this terrible secret. 4 days later, Diana called. "I have what you need," she said. "Photos, videos, and audio recordings. When can we meet?" We arranged to meet that afternoon. Diana brought a laptop and several folders of physical evidence. With clinical precision, she laid out the timeline of Harold and Catherine's affair. "Based on my investigation, this has been going on for approximately 7 months," she explained. "They meet primarily at an apartment rented under a company name linked to your husband. It's paid for through an LLC that's difficult to trace." She showed me photographs of them entering and leaving the apartment building on different dates. Then came the most difficult part. Intimate pictures of them together captured through the apartment window. Harold kissing Catherine, their bodies entwined. Expressions of passion I hadn't seen on my husband's face in years. Each image was like a physical blow. I asked Diana to stop the slideshow. "There's audio as well," she said gently. "Recorded conversations. They discuss you and your son, and the divorce." "Play it," I said, steeling myself. Harold's voice came through the speaker. "Madeline has no idea. Once the divorce is final, we'll have to be careful for a while, but eventually we can be together properly." Catherine's response was eager. "What about Thomas?" "He'll be hurt initially, but he'll get over it. People divorce and remarry all the time. We'll just need to manage the timing so it doesn't look suspicious." They were planning a future together. They had been deliberately deceiving not just me, but Thomas as well. My poor, unsuspecting son. "There's more," Diana said, hesitating. "Information about your divorce settlement." She played another recording. Harold was speaking to someone, presumably his lawyer. "She has no idea about the offshore accounts or the property in Aspen. The paperwork shows only the assets she knows about. She'll get the house and a reasonable settlement, nothing more. The bulk of our worth is protected." I felt a cold fury building inside me. Not only was Harold betraying me emotionally, but he was planning to cheat me financially as well. After 35 years together, after helping him build his career, after raising his son, this was how he valued me. "What about Thomas?" I asked Diana. "Does he know about any of this?" "From my surveillance and the conversations I've recorded, no. He appears to be completely in the dark. Catherine has been lying to him about working late or visiting friends when she meets your husband." This at least was a small relief. Thomas wasn't complicit in their deception, but he was still a victim just as I was. "What will you do now?" Diana asked. It was a good question. My initial impulse was to confront them immediately, to call Thomas and show him everything to expose their betrayal to the world. But something held me back. A lifetime of being underestimated by Harold, of having my business acumen dismissed, of being treated as less than had taught me patience and strategy. "I need copies of everything," I said. "And I need a recommendation for the best divorce attorney in the city, not just good, the best." Diana nodded approvingly. "I know exactly who you should talk to." That afternoon, I met with Sophia Mendez, a formidable divorce attorney with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. Her office was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the old boys' club atmosphere of Harold's firm. "Mrs. Bradford," she greeted me, "I understand you're in a complicated situation." I laid out everything Diana had discovered, including the evidence of Harold's hidden assets. Sophia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she looked up with a determined expression. "Your husband has made several critical mistakes," she said. "First, hiding assets during divorce proceedings is illegal. Second, as his wife, you're entitled to a fair share of all marital assets, including those he's attempted to conceal. And third," she smiled slightly, "he clearly has no idea who he's dealing with." What do you recommend? I asked. Don't confront him yet. Don't let either of them know you're aware of the affair or the hidden assets. We need to gather more financial evidence before the meeting with his lawyer. She outlined a plan that was bold and risky, but potentially devastating to Harold if executed properly. Can you access his home office? Any physical documents or his computer would be valuable. I nodded. He's out most evenings now. I'll have plenty of time. Perfect. And one more thing, Sophia added. I suggest we bring your son into this before the meeting. He deserves to know the truth, and his presence will add another layer of pressure. The thought of telling Thomas made my heart ache, but I knew she was right. He deserved to hear it from me, not discover it some other way. That night I searched Harold's office. His password-protected computer was beyond my technical skills, but I found something even better, a key to a safety deposit box I hadn't known existed. The next day, I visited our bank and discovered that as his spouse, I had legal access. Inside the box were documents revealing the full extent of Harold's deception. Offshore account details, property deeds, investment portfolios, all carefully hidden from our marital assets. I photographed everything and returned the originals exactly as I'd found them. Harold would never know I'd discovered his secrets. Armed with this new evidence, I met again with Sophia. She was impressed. This is exactly what we needed. Now here's how we'll handle the meeting. We spent hours planning every detail, anticipating Harold's responses, preparing for various scenarios. By the time we finished, I felt a newfound confidence. Harold had always treated me as intellectually inferior, incapable of matching his legal mind. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been. The final piece was the hardest telling Thomas. I invited him to lunch at a quiet restaurant away from both his home and mine. "Mum, what's this about?" he asked after we'd ordered. "You sounded serious on the phone." I took a deep breath. "Thomas, there's no easy way to tell you this. I've discovered something painful, and you need to know before the divorce meeting tomorrow." Gently, carefully, I explained what I'd learned. I showed him only the least explicit photos, enough to prove the affair without traumatizing him further. His face went through a range of emotions: disbelief, confusion, pain, and finally a terrible anger. "How long?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "At least 7 months, possibly longer." He sat in stunned silence, then put his head in his hands. "I never suspected. Not once. How could she do this? How could he?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I wished I could have spared you this." When he looked up, his eyes were red but determined. "What do you need me to do?" I explained Sophia's plan. Thomas listened attentively, his lawyer's mind already at work, despite his emotional turmoil. "I'll be there," he promised. "They won't get away with this." As painful as the conversation was, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. No more secrets, no more pretending. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the meeting dawned clear and bright, a beautiful spring day that belied the storm about to break. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that projected confidence and professionalism. My hands trembled slightly as I applied my makeup, but my resolve was unshaken. Sophia and I had arranged to arrive separately. I would go in alone, appearing vulnerable and unsuspecting. She would wait nearby with Diana and all our evidence ready to enter at the perfect moment. Harold's law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. The reception area featured expensive art plush seating and spectacular views. It was designed to intimidate, to remind clients of the power and prestige they were paying for. "Mrs. Bradford," the receptionist greeted me with practiced warmth. "They're expecting you in the Aspen conference room." The ironic name of the room wasn't lost on me. Aspen, where Harold had secretly purchased property with our marital funds. I was escorted down a long hallway to a large conference room dominated by a mahogany table. Harold was already there, looking impeccable in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Beside him sat his colleague Robert Chambers, the firm's top divorce attorney, known for his ruthless efficiency in protecting high-net-worth clients. To my shock, Catherine was also present, sitting close to Harold, their hands nearly touching on the table. The audacity of it made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure, pretending not to find her presence unusual. "Catherine, I didn't expect to see you here," I said mildly as I took my seat across from them. Harold answered before she could. "Catherine has been helping me organize some paperwork. She kindly offered to assist today." "How thoughtful," I murmured, noting how she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Robert cleared his throat. "Shall we begin? We have a settlement proposal prepared that we believe is quite generous." He slid a thick document across the table. I made a show of reading it, slowly turning pages with deliberate care, though Sophia had already warned me what it would contain. As expected, it offered me the house a monthly alimony that was far below what I was entitled to, and none of the hidden assets. "This seems incomplete," I said carefully. "There's no mention of the property in Aspen, or the offshore accounts." Harold's confident smile faltered momentarily. "I don't know what you're talking about, Madeline. There is no property in Aspen." "And these alimony figures," I continued as if he hadn't spoken, "they're based on an income that's substantially lower than your actual earnings, aren't they?" Robert intervened smoothly. "Mrs. Bradford, these figures accurately reflect your husband's disclosed income and assets. If you have concerns, perhaps you should have brought legal representation." "Oh, I've taken care of that," I said, just as the conference room door opened and Thomas walked in. The colour drained from Catherine's face. "Thomas, what are you doing here?" He didn't acknowledge her. His eyes were fixed on his father, cold and accusing. Harold recovered quickly. "Son, this is a private meeting about the divorce. There's no need for you to be involved." "I think there is," Thomas replied, his voice steady, despite the emotion I knew he was containing. "Considering you've been sleeping with my wife." The room fell silent. Robert looked between Harold and Catherine, clearly caught off guard by this unexpected development. Harold attempted to laugh it off. "That's absurd. Who told you such a ridiculous thing?" "My mother showed me the proof," Thomas said. "Photos, recordings, everything. I know about the apartment downtown. I know about the plans you two made." Catherine began to cry, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Thomas, please, I can explain." "Save it," he snapped. "I've heard the recordings. There's nothing to explain." Harold's demeanour changed his charm, giving way to cold calculation. "This is unfortunate, but it doesn't change the divorce proceedings. Madeline, I suggest we focus on the matter at hand." "You're right," I agreed, surprising him. "Let's focus on the matter at hand." I pressed a button on my phone, sending a pre-arranged signal. Moments later, Sophia entered the room, followed by Diana. They both carried briefcases. "Allow me to introduce my attorney, Sophia Mendez," I said, enjoying the flicker of recognition and concern that crossed Robert's face. Sophia's reputation preceded her. "And this is Diana Wells, a private investigator who has been very thorough in her work." Harold's composure finally cracked. "What is this, Madeline? Some kind of ambush?" "I prefer to think of it as due diligence," I replied. "Sophia, would you like to explain our counterproposal?" Sophia placed her briefcase on the table and removed a stack of documents. "Mr. Bradford, we have evidence of substantial financial impropriety. Undisclosed assets, including but not limited to property in Aspen, Colorado, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and a separate investment portfolio worth approximately $8 million. She laid out photocopies of the documents I'd found, along with financial analyses tracing the money to its sources. All of this was acquired during the marriage and is therefore considered marital property subject to equitable distribution. Robert leaned over to whisper urgently in Harold's ear. Harold's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Furthermore, Sophia continued relentlessly, we have evidence that Mr. Bradford has been billing clients for hours not worked and diverting funds through a shell company. The Bar Association would be very interested in this information, as would the IRS. Diana opened her briefcase, next removing a USB drive. I also have extensive documentation of Mr. Bradford's extramarital affair with Mrs. Catherine Bradford, including evidence that they conspired to conceal assets and defraud Mrs. Madeline Bradford during divorce proceedings. The room was so quiet you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Harold looked trapped, his eyes darting between the evidence on the table. His son's disgusted face and his lover's tear-streaked one. This is all very irregular, Robert finally said, his professional demeanor strained. Perhaps we should reschedule to give us time to review these allegations. That won't be necessary, I said, surprising everyone. I'm prepared to be reasonable. I have no desire to drag this out or make it more painful than it already is. I turned to Harold directly. Here's my offer. I want 75% of all marital assets, including those you attempted to hide. I want ownership of the 3 properties we purchased together. I want a 20% stake in your law firm, which I'll hold as a silent partner. Harold started to protest, but I held up my hand. In exchange, I won't report your financial improprieties to the IRS or the Bar Association. I won't make your affair public knowledge in a way that would damage your professional reputation. I'm offering you a chance to walk away with your career intact and a quarter of our assets, which is far more generous than you planned to be with me. I smiled at Catherine, who was staring at the table. Of course, this doesn't address the personal aspects of your betrayal. That's between you and Thomas. Thomas stood up, straightening his jacket. Catherine, I'll be filing for divorce immediately. Don't come home. Your things will be packed and sent to wherever you choose to go. She began sobbing in earnest then. Thomas, please, I love you. It was a mistake. A 7-month mistake, he asked coldly. Save your performances for someone who might believe them. Harold finally found his voice. This is blackmail. No, Sophia corrected. This is negotiation. Blackmail would be threatening to expose information for personal gain, without any legal entitlement to what's being requested. Mrs. Bradford is legally entitled to a fair division of marital assets, which you attempted to prevent through fraud. Robert whispered to Harold again, more urgently this time. I could imagine what he was saying. The evidence was damning. Fighting would only make it worse. After a long, tense moment, Harold nodded stiffly. Fine. Draw up the agreement. I stood up, gathering my purse. Wonderful. Sophia will handle the details. I believe our business here is concluded. As I headed for the door, I paused beside Harold. One more thing. I know about the client funds you've been misappropriating. That information isn't included in what I've shared today. Consider it insurance against any second thoughts you might have about our agreement. His face went pale, confirming my suspicion had hit its mark. I hadn't known for certain, but Harold's ethical flexibility had always extended further than he admitted. Thomas joined me at the door, and we walked out together, leaving behind the wreckage of betrayal and the beginning of justice. In the elevator, Thomas finally broke down, leaning against the wall as silent tears ran down his face. I held him, my 6-foot-tall son, suddenly seeming like the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys. I'm so sorry, Mum, he whispered. I had no idea. Neither did I assured him. But we know now, and we'll get through this together. As the elevator descended, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I was taking control of my life, refusing to be manipulated or undervalued. It hurt, yes. The pain of betrayal would take time to heal. But beneath the pain was something unexpected: freedom. The signatures on our divorce agreement were barely dry when Harold and Catherine's relationship imploded. According to mutual friends, they lasted less than 3 months after the confrontation in the conference room. Without the thrill of secrecy and the shared project of deceiving Thomas and me, they discovered they had little in common. Catherine attempted reconciliation with Thomas, sending tear-stained letters and emotional voice messages. Thomas, to his credit, never wavered. The divorce proceeded quickly, with Catherine receiving far less than she might have under normal circumstances. Thomas's colleagues at his law firm made sure of that. Harold faced professional consequences despite my discretion. Rumors spread through legal circles. Several long-standing clients took their business elsewhere. The managing partners at his firm initiated an internal audit of his billings and client accounts. 6 months after our divorce, Harold was asked to retire early, a face-saving alternative to outright termination. As for me, I embraced my new beginning with enthusiasm that surprised even myself. The financial settlement allowed me to expand my beauty supply business into new markets. I launched a skincare line specifically designed for women over 50 that quickly gained a loyal following. Interviews with beauty magazines and appearances on morning television shows elevated my profile and boosted sales beyond my wildest expectations. I sold our family home with its rooms full of tainted memories and purchased a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city I'd always loved. The space was modern, elegant, and entirely mine. Every piece of furniture, every color choice, every artwork reflected my taste alone. No compromises, no deference to someone else's preferences. Thomas and I grew closer through our shared trauma. He bought a house near mine, and we began a tradition of Sunday brunches, where we could talk openly about everything we'd experienced. Watching my son heal and rebuild his life filled me with pride. He started dating again after a year, cautiously and with greater wisdom. I'm not rushing into anything, he told me, and I'm paying attention to red flags this time. One surprising outcome of the divorce was reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Harold had subtly discouraged certain friendships over the years, particularly with women he considered too independent or bad influences. Now I reached out to these women and discovered many of them had similar stories of controlling relationships or painful divorces. Janet, my faithful friend through the worst of it, suggested we start a support group for women navigating major life transitions. What began as casual coffee meetings grew into a structured program with financial advisors, therapists, and legal experts as guest speakers. We called it Second Bloom, and watching women transform from fearful and uncertain to confident and empowered became one of my greatest joys. About 18 months after the divorce, I met Gregory at a charity gala. He was charming, intelligent, and refreshingly straightforward. A widower with grown children, he had none of Harold's need to dominate or control. Our relationship developed, slowly built on mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. When Gregory proposed 6 months later, I surprised us both by declining. I care deeply for you, I explained, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. But I've discovered something important about myself. I love my independence. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based solely on what I want and need. Instead of anger or hurt, Gregory responded with understanding. The offer remains open, he said with a smile. Whether as husband and wife or two people who care for each other, I want you in my life. We continued dating, enjoying a relationship unbound by traditional expectations or societal pressures. It was liberating to choose connection without surrender, intimacy, without loss of self. The healing wasn't always linear. I still had nights when the betrayal felt fresh, when I questioned how I could have been so blind when anger threatened to consume me. On those nights, I allowed myself to feel everything without judgment. Therapy helped, as did journaling, long walks, and honest conversations with friends who'd walked similar paths. Gradually, the painful memories lost their sharp edges. I could think of Harold without that immediate twist of hurt and rage. Catherine became a footnote rather than a central character in my story. Their betrayal, which once seemed world-shattering, diminished in importance as my new life expanded. 3 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter from Harold. He was moving to Florida, he wrote, and wanted to apologize before leaving. The letter acknowledged his betrayal, his financial deceptions, his years of undervaluing me. It stopped short of true remorse, framing his actions as mistakes rather than deliberate choices. But it was more accountability than I'd expected from him. I read the letter twice, then placed it in a drawer without responding. His apology was his to give. Forgiveness was mine to consider on my own timeline. Perhaps someday I would reach out, if only to show him that my happiness had never depended on him. For now, it was enough to know that he recognized, however imperfectly, the harm he had caused. The most profound lesson from this painful chapter came gradually through reflection and distance. We teach people how to treat us by what we accept, what we tolerate, and what we allow. For too many years, I had accepted Harold's dismissal of my intelligence, tolerated his control of our finances, and allowed him to make me feel less than. Never again would I diminish myself to make someone else comfortable with their power. I share my story not to villainize Harold or Catherine, though their actions were undeniably cruel. I share it because too many women remain silent about betrayal, as if the shame belongs to them rather than those who betrayed. Too many women accept less than they deserve in relationships, finances, and life choices. If you're facing betrayal or ending a long relationship, know this. The pain is real and valid. Allow yourself to feel it fully, but also know that on the other side of that pain lies the possibility of a life more authentic and fulfilling than you can imagine while in the depths of hurt. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, build your support network. And when the moment comes to stand up for yourself, do it with the quiet confidence of someone who knows her worth, is not determined by another's capacity to recognize it. The story of my marriage's end was painful, but it was not the end of my story. It was in many ways just the beginning. At 58, I discovered that life can bloom in unexpected seasons, that resilience grows from adversity, and that the most important relationship we'll ever have is with ourselves. Have you ever had to rebuild after a betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there's life and joy after betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to rewrite the next chapter of your life.